Hi everybody, welcome to What's My House Worth? What is What's My House Worth? Well, it's a new show right here on the Needham Channel that hopefully will help you determine what your house is worth. How do we do that? Well, with two segments. The first segment goes over all the previous month's sales data of residential real estate right here in Needham. And the second segment, we bring in a guest. This week's guest will be Chip Davis of the assessing department right here in Needham. But before we go to those two segments, you should probably learn a little bit about the host. So for that, I'll toss it to the first co-host, Ryan McDonnell.
Hello, thanks Rob. My name is Ryan McDonnell. I am an owner at Hawthorne Real Estate here in Needham. We have two divisions in our company, a residential real estate brokerage under the tag of Hawthorne Properties, and then we also do residential construction and development under the name Hawthorne Builders. So we deal in all facets of residential real estate. We help buyers who are looking to buy, sell, redevelop their property, or redevelop a property that they don't currently own. So I'll turn it over to Rob.
My name is Rob Ticktin. I own Encompass Residential. It's a real estate brokerage company that helps longtime homeowners. We do this by providing an all-in-one solution for people selling a long-time home. And also, I do work with Datic Development, a development company right here in Needham. So between Ryan and I, we both buy and sell real estate and help people in town buy and sell real estate. So hopefully we're qualified to help you determine what your house is worth. Our first order of business is the stat sheet.
The stat sheet is every month as part of evaluating residential real estate. You want to look at the big picture. Look what's happening in your town or in that area where you're focusing. So what we're going to do is we're going to take you through the previous month's sales data. We're going to look for what jumps off the page. We're going to look at how many houses sold, what the averages are, what the trends are, and help you sort of apply that on your level to your specific property. So the first up, we had a total for the month of February of 19 homes sold in Needham. That compared to only 7 in 2011. So there's a lot of reasons why that could happen. You know, what do you think, Rob? What might be a reason why we have more sales this year over last?
Well, it's definitely a significant increase. And the one thing that comes to mind, I would think, would have more to do with the weather than anything else. If you think about February for 2011, that was one of the most treacherous winters we've had in recent memory, whereas this February has been wonderful. So as a result, it just seems like more and more people are getting out and buying homes.
Yeah, it's just amazing what that weather factor can do. I mean, when you talk about when you're going to have an open house or you're going to have showings, and you look outside that morning and it's raining, it's pouring, and you're just like, oh geez. But in this case, last year we were buried under 1.5 feet of snow throughout basically the whole month of February. This year, and even the months preceding, because the homes that close in February were generally looked at and put under agreement, you know, a month or two ahead of time. So even the months of December and January, comparatively, were very mild versus the last year, and that is definitely a reason why we've seen a spike.
So because we've had 19 homes sell in the month of February, it's a good size sample to kind of dig in and see what's going on with the market. And what we're finding is of those houses, those 19 houses that have sold, the average list price for those houses, average price that they were on the market for, was $651,000. The average sales price, you'll notice, is about $20,000 less, or 97% of list, which is just about where it should be.
Yeah, we typically see sales coming in at or around 97% of the then list price. What that doesn't necessarily tell you and doesn't account for, as we'll talk about later when we look at what's on the market, is what was the original list price. Because when you see 97% of list, is that your sale price, that tells you that a property was priced right. And that's one of our themes throughout working with sellers, working with buyers, is properties should sell close to their list price if they're priced appropriately. And that's why you see that 97%. That's a good number, and that's where we expect the trend to continue.
Right, so what we're gleaning from February is basically you've got things that are priced pretty well are moving, more so than they have in the previous 2 years for the month of February. And the average days on market is 132 days, which basically tells you that it's going to take between 4 and 5 months for you to sell your home unless you're priced extremely well.
One other thing that 132 tells you is the time of year you're dealing with, because real estate is on an annual basis very cyclical. It has peaks and it has slow times, and one of the historic slow times is from, say, Thanksgiving through the holiday season into January and then February. So you may have a house that, had it been put on the market on April 5th, may take longer to sell if that same house is put on the market on November 5th, just because there are fewer people out there looking, and a lot of it has to do with holiday season, the weather, which we touched on, So the 132 days on market is not surprising for homes that are closing in February.
So there's your stat sheet. Next up, why don't we take a look at the big seller?
In the month of February, our big seller is 61 Briarwood Circle. 61 Briarwood Circle, new construction, built on it's a cul-de-sac that has, over the past couple of years, there's been, I think, 3 new construction homes on that street. This was the last one to be completed. It's 4,800 square feet, 5 bedrooms, 4 baths, on a large lot, about a 14,000 square foot lot. And what really grabbed me about this property is when you look out the back of it, you have basically unobstructed views of the Wellesley Reservoir.
Right, and no surprise to see that the big seller is a new construction home, as is often the case. Briarwood, of course, is right off of Honeywell on your way to Wellesley, so it's on the Wellesley line. One thing that kind of jumps out when I saw this listing for the first time was the days on market. And I'd shown before for the month of February, the typical days on market was somewhere in the 130s. This one had 1 day on market. Usually when you see that, you don't want to really try to glean too much from that, because typically speaking, potentially there was some kind of agreement maybe in the works before it went on the market, because it just doesn't happen all that often where you throw something on the market and boom, within 1 day you have your buyer and you have it locked down.
Particularly in new construction, and particularly when a house isn't yet complete. And touching on a bit about what Rob just said, and this being an outlier, that days on market being an outlier, so it just sort of exemplifies how real estate is so fluid, and there's so much analysis that goes into evaluating your house or someone else's house that you're interested maybe in purchasing, or if you're just trying to compare what your house is worth versus another one. There's factors that may apply to one case that don't necessarily apply to another, and you just sort of have to take everything in, look at every case individually, and make your decisions off those facts.
Right, and in the town of Needham, the 1 day on market, you see that less than once per month over any given year. So that's our big seller. It would make sense that our next slide would be our not so big seller of the month. Ryan, why don't you talk a little bit about what the not so big seller seems pretty self-explanatory.
Yep, it is. It is the home that closed in the month that had the lowest price compared to the other sales. So this one was 31 High Street. So this property was positioned both as a land sale and as a house sale. The lot itself is about 11,000 square feet, which is a big lot. It's right near a property that was just redeveloped into multiple units. It's also located very close to the intersection of Webster and High Street. So it's a fairly high traffic location, and the house is very, very close to the street. So in our opinion, this was a house that was priced very well. It was priced at $449. It ended up closing at $432. And the interesting thing, which will sort of lead us into our guest segment, is this house is assessed at $511. Rob, what does that tell you?
Well, it tells me that the assessed value doesn't really match up with the actual value of the house. Since it was assessed at $511 and it sold for $432, safe to say the town of Needham, on this particular instance, was off the mark by $80,000. But all in all, you're talking about a 1,700 square foot house with 3 beds and 2 baths on a really nice sized lot selling for $432,000. So it would stand to reason it seems a little low. It's because it's on a busy street, but it's still, at the end of the day, a lot of space for just $432,000. After we have the not so big seller, the next up is the deal of the month. Ryan, why don't you talk about what the deal of the month is?
This month, our deal of the month was 45 Kimball Street. And 45 Kimball Street, it's a great location. It's very close to town. It's on a nice street. The house is about 2,000 square feet. It sold for $718. It went on the market for $769. And at the time when it went on, my initial thought was, wow, I think that they priced that very well. It's got a lot to offer. But in real estate, as you see, there are never, ever sure things. And there are outside circumstances that affect every deal. And in this case, they ended up, timing wasn't perfect for them, and they ended up closing at $718. But, aside from timing, there may have been some other factors that led to this house closing a little under asking. What might some of those be?
It's a good question, Ryan. One of those things might be the lack of a garage. A garage is important to a lot of people, and it's hard to quantify because every house, of course, is unique, but I would say the ballpark would be about $30,000. That's the value to a buyer of a garage. And you don't even need to fit the car in the garage, but at least it's some space outdoor that if you're not going to put your car in it, at least you can put all your outdoor items in there. That's number one. Number two, I wanted to point out, you had talked about the fact that the sale price was so much less than list. 97% what we saw from the month sales data, so this is definitely on the higher side as far as variation. But one thing I did want to point out was that the assessed value in this house, spot on. It sold for $718,000, the assessed value $718,900. So if I'm going to take a little bit away from the assessing department in the last listing, we got to give them their props on this one. They were off by just $900, right?
And going back to Rob's point about the garage, it's when you're looking at two houses that are side by side, one has a garage, one doesn't, you could value them, as Rob said, one of them's going to be worth more, and it's up to the buyers to figure out what that value is. And the other side of that is when you have people in the market, they have a certain set of criteria that they're looking for that are on their wish list when they're out on their search. And by not having a feature like a garage, you may eliminate in a segment of that market that won't even come to your house to see it. So it's just, when you are looking at your house, you try to be as objective as possible. You have to look at all the good things and all the things you love about it, because believe me, there was a lot to love about this house. And you also have to take into consideration the things that an objective buyer is going to say, you know what, I don't love that, and you have to factor that into your valuation process.
Yes, a colleague of mine by the name of Ryan McDonnell once told me that the more things you have to explain about your house, the more reasons people have not to want to buy it. So that's your deal of the month. Next up, we want to look ahead to next month and see what's on the plate.
Well, as of March 1st, we have 103 active single-family listings. The current average list price per square foot is $338. So, as you remember, the sales data for February showed us a sale price per square foot of $297. So what that tells me right there is that you may have some properties that are on the market that are overpriced. So what we would expect to see is the sale prices actually coming in around that $300 per square foot number. But it's not uncommon to have properties on the market and not all selling for right at asking, and some might go through price reductions, et cetera.
Right, and if you're watching it at home and you're hearing, well, $300 a square foot, that's what my house is worth, and you're starting to do the calculation, not really so fast, you don't want to do that. Not all houses obviously are the same. It's just a good number to kind of apply, maybe to get an idea, but it doesn't necessarily mean that your house is worth your square footage times 300 square feet.
Right. You always have to look at every single angle when you're talking about what your house is worth, because you can do comps all day long, and we do that, and there's always differences, and it's somewhat subjective as to how you assess value to those differences between your house and your neighbor's who just sold his for a number that you can't believe. So it's important to always look at all of the facts. Don't just say, oh, that house is a 2-car garage, mine is a 1-car garage, so I'm worth more, but the house with the 1-car garage might have a beautiful kitchen. So back to the market as a whole, you're looking at what the average listing price right now as of March 1st is $1,299, but that seems high. Is there any reason why that might be high?
Well, it seems high, especially considering the average sales price was $600 and change. One of the reasons that number is so high, in addition to a lot of new construction on the market, is one listing in particular that's on the market for $18 million. Yes, that's one single family home. It's on a 29-acre lot, mind you, and it's a 10,000 square foot home. But whenever you have an $18 million listing, it might tend to tweak just a little bit the data of what's on the market.
Right, it's what we call an outlier.
It's what we call an outlier. Just like the one day on market was the outlier with regards to Briarwood, with regards to what's on the market right now, the outlier is the $18 million listing.
So that's our market snapshot for what lies ahead, and we'll be revisiting some of these houses, I'm sure, in the subsequent months on the show. Before we send it over to our next segment, we want to provide you with a phone number that you can call to give comments, feedback. If there's something that you want to see talked about, a guest that you might want to see in studio, please reach out to us. We're happy to try to incorporate that into our future telecasts. That number is 781-707-6564. You can leave a message, you can talk to one of us, and we can hopefully get your thoughts back on the air next month.
Next up on What's My House Worth, our interview segment, so stay right there.